Allison Janine.
You got half a minute.
They'll sell everything else, yeah.
Good luck to you both.
I'm thinking it's
Thank you. We'll be here. I mean,
Can I have a,
Swan Song will be
I haven't asked
our
for
Dacian
retirement yet.
base.
Yeah, I understand that, but I mean, one more year than I expected.
12 more months too.
I'll take it, they don't.
You were reappointed in 19 and then 23, they put the
Okay.
here. So I looked this up, we're all 20.
Lori, what time is it? Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the Delaware Public Service Commission meeting of May 22nd, 2024. We have the reading of the meeting minutes of May 1st, 2024. Does anybody have any corrections, changes, thoughts, desires on the minutes of May the 1st, which might be very, very exciting? The meeting was very exciting.
Yeah.
3 more.
So you're taking quite a while to make a motion.
Move that we adopt the meeting minutes of May 1st, 2024.
I second the motion.
Is there any discussion on the motion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 The abstentions, and there's no no's because everyone voted aye. Thank you very much. We have a public comment session right now. Does anybody wish to make any comment to the Public Service Commission? Mr. Brewer?
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman and Commissioners. Nice to be back, that's all I can say. Good to see familiar faces.
Thank you, Doctor. Raj was our executive director for 3 years, sometime a while ago.
Yeah.
Welcome, Raj, as always. Now we have Ms. Johnson from DelDOT is present, I believe. If you'd be kind enough to come forward, we're very interested in your presentation, and thank you for coming over to inform us about the EV charging situation.
Sure, and thank you so much for having me. I'm actually joined here by the Assistant Director of our Division of Transportation Resilience and Sustainability, Trisha Art. And so thank you so much for this opportunity to present where we are from a DelDOT perspective on EV charging with a focus specifically on the NEVI program. So Charging Forward is actually the name of our statewide electric vehicle charging infrastructure plan. I'll reference that a little bit in the plan, but in the presentation, but the focus, as I mentioned, will be on NEVI. So next slide, please. Just because every time we get an opportunity to talk about our department, we like to emphasize our mission, which is excellence in transportation, every trip, every mode, every dollar, and every one. And so we have to, but I also like to include that in our presentations. Next slide. So I would be remiss if I didn't recognize that DelDOT is not alone in this initiative of electric vehicle charging infrastructure work that we're doing at a state level. DENREC has been involved in this work for a significant amount of time, way before DelDOT was, but DelDOT is used to delivering construction projects. And because of that, and because electric vehicle infrastructure requires construction, we have the model to be able to do that. But DENREC really has a lot of the institutional knowledge related to it, and so we've been working very closely with them on this work. Next slide. So as I mentioned at the beginning of my presentation, the focus is really going to be on the National Electric Vehicle Infrastructure Program, which is funded through the investments and the Infrastructure Investments Job Act. And so that comes through our Federal Highways Administration program. It is formula funds, so it's not grant funding. These are funds that we will receive over 5 years, amounting to $17.6 million. And that funding is has specific requirements for how that money can be used for electric vehicle charging. We have to create a plan that outlines how that funding will be used. And then we've had to make an update to that plan since that time. And then the ultimate construction of those locations. There's a fly on my mic. I don't want to eat it, so. So the requirements do provide that fast chargers, so the charging stations that charge the fastest are used on what are called alternative fuel corridors or AFC corridors, and then eventually level 2, and I'll get into that a little bit more into the presentation. But additionally, the governor's recommended budget does propose a $4 million state investment for fiscal year 25, and that funding we really envision to be used for community charging. And so the way that we look at it is that we're working from two ends. So the NEVI program, the federal program, requires investments at the beginning for the corridors that are the largest throughout our state. And it's really serving our interstate travel, right? So folks that are traveling through our state or maybe coming from Pennsylvania, New York, New Jersey to go to our beaches, it's serving those individuals. But we're not, because of the restrictions and the guidelines of the NEVI program, we're not able to serve our communities very quickly. And so the $4 million from the state funds will address our community charging. And so there's reference to the framework for how we plan to serve not just NEVI, but also additional state funding that I mentioned, as well as the programs that DENREC has. A lot of that is captured in our statewide plan that the state has just has gone through the process of finalizing. And so I don't get too much into the details here, but that plan is has gotten approval from the governor's office. We've done all of the public outreach for that. We've gotten all the comments, and we're currently working for Spanish translation for that plan. And then we're also going to be having a final public meeting just to kind of wrap that up. That information will also be available on our webpage. Okay, so let's get into the NEVI requirements, which is why I'm here. So the NEVI requirements, so for the NEVI plan itself, we had to do a plan, as I mentioned. We can't just go and pick locations at will. We had to have a very strategic plan that had to be approved by FHWA. Yes. Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, I'm just moving. Yes, I'm sorry. Thank you. So NEVI requirements, there we go. Okay, so there's a NEVI plan. It had to have been approved by FHWA. We also had an update since that time. It does require public outreach, which we would do anyway because it's just the right thing to do. We had working group meetings that did involve numerous stakeholders, including the utilities. Those were in June and September. And then we had, that was in 2022, and then we had public workshops in October and November of 2022. in order to move from the AFC corridors, the alternative fuel corridors, which are US 113, US 13, SR1, and I-95, in order to construct any locations, any electric vehicle locations beyond those corridors, the federal guidance requires that the infrastructure that we build has to be fully operational. So it's not that we can start the construction of locations on on those corridors, and then since we've already initiated that construction, we can start construction in our communities. That's not how the guidelines are laid out. The way that it's laid out is those locations have to be fully operational. And so that's what I mean when I say it could take a while before we could ever use that money in our communities and off of those AFC corridors. Fully built out, basically. So let's move on to the next slide, and I'll get into it. I'm getting ahead of myself. So there are specific requirements for this charging, and I have them laid out here. For those of you who may not be able to see the screen very well, it's really on specified charging needs and requirements, the speed in which the vehicles would be charged, the standardized connector types, making sure that everyone essentially can charge. You don't have, so for example, Teslas, currently, if you don't have a Tesla, you can't charge at their charging stations. These are more universal. They have to have standardized connector types. They must be publicly available 24/7. Specific payment method requirements are laid out. They have to be able to, for example, you don't have to have a membership to a specific app in order to charge. You should be able to use your credit card. This speaks to the equity component. Physical and cybersecurity strategies, and then states must maintain charging infrastructure standards for at least 5 years. So the goal for DelDOT, and a lot of other states are doing this, is that we don't want to own these chargers, right? We don't want to maintain these chargers. We don't own gas stations. We want to be able to help put the funding out so that these chargers will be built. We want to make sure that they are properly maintained and that we're getting the data from the usage and collecting that data, and we have to provide that to FHWA. And then we want to be able to back away. And so that's a 5-year time span. There also has to be a minimal uptime requirement of greater than 97%. And so again, getting that data, we'll be able to monitor the level of uptime that each of these locations that we invest in has from that performance level. Next slide, please. Okay, so I talked about the general requirements, talked about the fact that we have a plan and that we have to address the AFC corridors, and then we can get to the community charging. So how is that going to roll out? So it's going to roll out in 3 different rounds is how we envision it. So round 1 really was on, and this is all referenced in the NEVI plan, so it has to be the direct current, or these are the fast chargers, the chargers that charge the vehicles the fastest. They have to be installed within 50 miles along an AFC corridor, within 1 travel mile of a corridor. So what does that mean? So basically you have SR1 that runs from the north to the south of the state. I can't remember exactly how long that corridor is, but we could put one right in the middle of the state and be done with SR1. As long as it was up and running, we could essentially be, that AFC corridor, once it was operational, would be good. So we'd have to do that for each of the corridors as I identified, US 113, 13, Route 1, and I-95. We're fortunate that we're a very small state, and so essentially, if Pennsylvania or Maryland put their chargers at the close to the state lines, then we may not have to even put a charger, more than one charger in some of those locations. But we want to do more than the minimum. And so, but round one is really round one, which we put an RFP out for, and I'll talk about that a little bit further into the presentation. But we recognized where those chargers probably would be best, and so I have those locations identified. When we put out the RFP, those were the locations that we had suggested for interested bidders. One other thing that I skipped over that's important to understand is that a eligible charger has to have 4 ports. So it has to charge 4 vehicles simultaneously, be able to charge 4 vehicles at the same time. So what we always try to convey is that a port and a station are different. So you have a station, which I equate to like a pedestal, right? And from that, you can have 4 cables, each that would connect to a separate vehicle. So that is the requirement for NEVI. And as I said, round one for our plan is every 50 miles. So round two, again, in the NEVI plan, is to address the higher density residential areas, but still on the AFC corridors as referenced. And so we're moving from a goal of every 50 miles to every 25 miles. And so then you can see some of the potential locations included there: Middletown, Smyrna, Milford, Harrington, Bridgeville, and Georgetown. And then these locations would hopefully serve or start to serve some of our higher density residential areas. And then round three is after build out. So this would be once we've checked the box with FHWA to say that, okay, all of our round one AFC corridors are fully built out and operational. Now we can use whatever remaining NEVI federal funds are available to invest in fast chargers or level 2 chargers and to really serve those communities. And so we're investing in they don't have to be on the AFC corridors. They can be on state routes or local roads. So where are we with NEVI currently? So we did an RFP for round one in August of 2023. The bids closed for that in November. And then we are currently now into contract negotiations. So can tell you that we have selected bidders. We are currently working through getting all of the items that are necessary in order to move forward with these construction locations and getting those contracts negotiated. I can share that we do anticipate to be able to build out more than the 50 miles with this first round, which is great. But I can't officially release any specifics until those contracts are completed. And so from there, we'll move to construction and then data reporting and maintenance. Okay, so then while we're getting the round one in motion, we'll be moving into phase 2 for NEVI. But we'll also, as long as we, knock on wood, as long as we get this funding for the $4 million for the state funds, we'll also be putting out an RFP for the community charging. And that community charging is really focused on the equity component, making sure that we are providing charging opportunities for folks that don't have driveways, that don't have garages, multifamily dwellings. We want to make sure that they have an equal opportunity to have accessibility to charging. And then finally, NEVI Phase 3, once we're fully built out, that would happen after that status is certified by FHWA. That is, I think, the extent of my presentation. I just wanted to make sure there weren't any other, yeah, I think that's it.
Mr. Drexler?
Hello, Ms. Johnson. Thank you for that comprehensive presentation. Couple of questions. So these bids that are going out, are they to landowner, for the construction of these on privately held land or state-owned land?
So it's private-owned land. So for example, this is just an example, a hotel could say that we have partnered with, for example, Electrify America, which is an EV charging company, and as a result, they would put in a bid to have a location constructed there.
Right, so, and after the 5 years that you're monitoring and getting the information about usage and doing that you just turn it over and it's then maintained by the hotel up to those same standards of 24/7 and the 97%?
Correct. And so it is on them for the whole 5 years for them to maintain. It's just we will be getting the information to know how they're performing with those locations. And based on the contract language, there's incentives or motivations for them to keep that going, to ensure that they're using that funding properly and that they are maintaining it and providing that level of service.
And my last question is, are you getting any bids from gas station owners?
So yes, we did get bids from gas stations, correct.
Interesting. Okay, thank you very much.
Yes.
Commissioner Gray?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Ms. Johnson, for the presentation. Did I miss something, or is it a fact that Wilmington is not in your list of high-density locations? And can you explain why?
So I didn't realize that Wilmington wasn't listed there, but they are definitely part of the consideration. And keep in mind that those were examples that we gave, but weren't necessarily, those are not the isolated. So for example, what we proposed or what we had laid out in the plan, it's just a plan. It's not exactly what's going to happen. And so we recognize that there's also, changes that would happen. Keep in mind too that the locations that we selected were based on where there's already existing charging and where there is an increased level of adoption. So that's not to say that Wilmington isn't part of that equation, but that was kind of the approach when they selected locations.
Okay, it's my hope that Wilmington is at least at the table in the discussions and for the planning. I have two other questions. This prompts me to think and question, is there any initiative in this plan with respect to state or government-owned vehicles becoming the beneficiary of the charging infrastructure that's being deployed? Is that a discussion at the table at all?
So the statewide infrastructure charging plan is specific to charging and does not discuss fleet vehicles. That is a conversation that we are having within the department and that I believe the Office of Management and Budget at the state level is also having, since they, manage a significant amount of the state's fleet.
Okay, the fair statement. So my only comment in closing would be, I'd be interested as a commissioner to have some insight as to state-owned and government-owned vehicles in the state as well as fleets and commercial vehicles that may ultimately participate in the program. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. No further questions, and thank you for the presentation.
Ms. Johnson, one of the big issues on infrastructure has been the maintenance of the infrastructure. A lot of complaints about inoperable charging stations. And I understand in your contracts, you're going to have all this nice language, and it's going to require them to do this and do that. But at the end of the day, it takes people to go out there and check on those infrastructure and double check on the people who get awarded contracts. Do you have resources in your department or some other department in the state that's going to permit you to go out and do quality control on these, if there's some infrastructure?
Yeah, so great point. Trish and I are a division of two, so we will not be the ones out there doing that maintenance and review, but we do have a consultant, AECom, who will be providing those services. They're an international company that has actually been working with other state DOTs on the same program, and they will be providing that support.
Now, how do you prioritize your going into communities? What standards do you set up to decide which neighborhood gets a charger or where in the neighborhood it goes? Or
Right. So there's a couple approaches that we're taking. So for the $4 million specifically that we hope to get from the fiscal year 25 budget, as well as the funding for community charging from what is left over from NEVI, the plan is to, one, reach out to local governments to figure out who, one, is interested, and then two, who is ready, right? So you could be interested, but you may not have, to your point, the resources to be able to maintain these locations. So we're doing some outreach to local governments. Our division, in collaboration with DENREC, to actually have a phone call, an interview with these local governments to get a sense as to, who's ready for these chargers. And then also using modeling with different data sets, including what we're doing is we take DMV data to see where there has been adoption based on different zip codes, and then correlating that with population and types of residents, so residential homes, so multi-home dwellings, things like that, to be able to help prioritize those locations. Again, we will have in our RFPs some recommendations as to where the focus should be, but that won't eliminate any locations that are proposed that don't fall within those locations.
now, on those contracts that have been set out there, and I guess what's the expectation about the conclusion of those contracts? They get a contract, you come to terms, and when do you expect the infrastructure to be in place so it'll be usable?
Right. And so what we're seeing is that there's different timelines, and it just depends on the existing infrastructure. So some of the bids that I've seen, they may be able to turn it around within 6 months. Some of them are 18 months. So it really just depends on the location and what is required from a construction and utility tie-in perspective.
What incentive does anybody have to say, put an infrastructure piece, a fast charger in my front yard? Why are people going to sign up for these things?
So are you asking like companies? Why would
Communities.
So I think what we're looking at is it wouldn't necessarily be a community charger from the perspective of like a local government might be interested to put one in at their library parking lot because they have constituents that come into their library and sit there for a couple hours. And so why not provide this amenity at a cost, of course. So from a local government perspective, we recognize that that is something also that's the highest it's the highest density of population is in our local governments. From a unincorporated perspective, there are locations in which there's still gas stations, and so there could be gas stations or hotels. I know some bids that had come through for DENREC for a Volkswagen grant program that they had put out. There was stores that had put grant applications in. So we're trying to get people to move away from the model of a gas station per se. The way that I like to describe it is we're not thinking about you're charging your vehicle every time you run out like you do when you go to get gas. Think about it more about your cell phone. So you charge your cell phone when you get home, you plug it in, and it charges, and then you're ready and you're good to go for most of the day, unless you're going to the airport, for example, and you're going to be there all day. But at the airport, they have chargers for your phone or an area that you can charge your phone. And so this influx of funding is to be able to provide these opportunities for folks who are moving through our state, and we need to relieve that level of anxiety that they're not going to be able to charge. And so we're providing those opportunities, but from a community perspective, people may not have access or the ability or the financing to be able to provide charging at home. And so we need to be able to do it where they are. And so that's where the community charging focus comes from.
How many people in the audience have an electric vehicle or hybrid vehicle, if you don't mind putting your hand up? Holy mackerel, only 3 in the room are commissioners. I like to park right out here. So, that's just a hint. I'm not,
I'm glad you made that hint, Mr.
$4
Chairman.
million and 7, so I don't know. I'm sure you got some discretion, Ms. Johnson. Oh, really? Oh, gosh, I'm gonna have to start using that. Thank you so much.
What? On a nice day, it's a lovely walk.
Is there somebody on the staff of the Public Service Commission that you talk with or ask questions of or coordinate with or ask for suggestions?
So currently, Matt Hartigan is part of our stakeholders group, and so he's been part of those meetings.
Just one last thought comes to my mind. I use the YMCA. They have a courtesy charging facility, but many of the places that would offer on private property the opportunity to recharge a vehicle, if it's not working, they basically say it doesn't belong to us. So they kind of point in any direction. So is that an issue you will be able to overcome? I know you're getting data, but what happens on site when the person gets there or if it's not working? Is it the proprietor, or will there be contact information that they can reach out for solutions?
So part of the NEVI requirements does require 24/7 customer service component. And so whether that means that they'll have someone come out right at that moment, I can't, I don't guarantee that. But that there has to be some type of ability to notify whoever the owner is and whoever maintains that technical component of the charger to be notified and to service. And so that's part of that data collection to ensure that people are following up and providing that level of service.
Ms. Johnson, it seems to me that the adoption of EV is being hindered right now because of the perception out there that there's no infrastructure. So I believe that this commission thoroughly supports your mission, and we thank you very much for coming in and talking with us. And, you know, sometimes we even let other people ask questions, especially when they,
So, are there how is the,
Excuse me, Ms. Melcher, the microphone, please. Thank you.
so you charge for the actual electricity, but for the operation and maintenance, how are private property owners permitted to collect for that? And are there limitations on how much they can charge, or how is that collected?
So the NEVI requirement just states that the charges have to be reasonable. It doesn't break down the electric component and the operations and maintenance break. It doesn't say like it has to be this percentage or that percentage of. It just basically says, and I had it written down. There's a specific statement that says, maintain cost of charging at a price that is reasonable. So that's what the NEVI statement says.
I have a question. If, hi, in terms of where you would locate it, and you said in this case you were looking at Route 1, 95, 13, and 113, did you work with other states into which those highways go to, you know, so that there's, I mean, the idea is that there would be, you know, I wouldn't want to say a smooth charging experience, but, you know, you don't want to have, okay, we have one or two in Delaware, and then we get through Maryland and, you know, it's kind of nothing. So what's the sense of putting them in Delaware where you did? Do you know what I'm saying?
So just to make sure I answer your question and to clarify, the AFC corridors, the 4 that you mentioned, those are designated, they're proposed and then designated by the federal highway. So those 4 corridors are required. We have to build those out. That's what they are measuring. That's what they're looking for. That's what has to be built every 50 miles, and we plan to do better than that.
Okay, so you didn't choose them.
They
were chosen for you.
We proposed them because they're the interstate travel. There were, I think, 7 or 8 opportunities to amend that, for states to amend that list and to add additional locations. But our thought process was, why would we amend them? If we amend them, then we're tying ourselves in that funding to those specific locations, when if we can build out the 4 that we've defined, we have the flexibility to use the remaining funding wherever we want in the state. And so that's why we didn't move beyond those corridors.
Okay, thank you.
Yes.
are there any further questions? Okay, thank you once again.
You're welcome. Thank you for your time.
Our pleasure. We now have the Joshua Bowman consent calendar. How many times did you fall asleep preparing all these documents? I want to say thank you to Josh and to, is it Brian Geller? Mr. Geller in the courtroom, so to speak. Anyway, thank you. Hiding in the back corner. Thank you as well for your contribution to today's consent calendar. It's not the most exciting work, but as you both know, it's very, very important to the applicants. So I just wanted to say thank you for your diligence in getting these all done, and ask if there's any item on the calendar that any of the commissioners wish to have placed on the regular agenda. If not, I would ask that we'd have a motion to approve the consent agenda.
I move that we adopt the consent agenda as presented.
I'll second.
Is there any discussion on the motion to approve the consent agenda? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Any abstentions, any nays? The motion carries. We have the regular agenda. Number 1 is in the matter of the application of Artesian Water Company for an increase in water base rates. And we've got Ms. Emerson, Skaggs with us, and I guess we have, I'm not sure who from staff is going to be taking charge of this.
Mr. Geddes should be on the phone.
Oh, he's going to be on the phone, okay. Okay, thank you, Jim. And obviously, Ms. Iori will be, participating. Please proceed.
Good afternoon, Chairman and Commissioners. Courtney Emerson on behalf of Artesian Water Company. We're here in docket 230601, and before you today is proposed order 10455, which would grant the joint motion of Artesian staff and the DPA to revoke the delegation to hearing examiner Kenton, approve presentation of a settlement agreement directly to the Commission, and approve the form of public notice of an evidentiary hearing to be held on June 12, 2024. We appreciate the cooperation of the DPA and staff in reaching consensus on the settlement agreement. The form of settlement agreement, which was signed effective this morning, was filed on Delafile this morning. I presume that no one here has a copy, so Crystal does have paper copies if anybody wants one right now, but it is on Delafile for review. Since we were last before you on this matter, hearing examiner Kenton conducted a hybrid public comment session on January 9th, 2024. No members of the public appeared or provided comments regarding Artesian's application. The evidentiary hearing on the application was originally scheduled for July 15th to the 19th. The parties have since reached a settlement in principle for an $11.2 million increase in base rates. The parties desire to present the settlement agreement at a public evidentiary hearing to be conducted before the Commission at the June 12, 2024 meeting without proceeding first through hearing examiner and waiting for his proposed findings and recommendations. Attached to proposed order 10455 is a proposed form of public notice notifying the public that the evidentiary hearing will be held here on June 12, 2024 for the Commission's review and approval. Artesian proposes to meet the statutory notice requirement by having the approved form of notice published on its website and on the Commission's website by tomorrow, May 23rd, and through the date of the hearing. Additionally, Artesian is taking the following voluntary steps to maximize notice of the hearing. Artesian has posted a notice on its website beginning last week stating the Delaware Public Service Commission will hold a public hearing on June 12, 2024 regarding Artesian Water Company's application to increase water service rates. Please check back here after May 22nd, 2024 for additional information. A similar message is included on customer bills issued from May 21st through June 7th. Finally, Artesian proposes to email all customers with email addresses on file for bill presentation, advising them of the June 12th hearing. The parties are confident that the testimony they will present to the Commission on June 12th, 2024 will persuade the Commission that the proposed settlement agreement is in the public interest and will result in just and reasonable rates. Thus, the parties request that the Commission revoke its delegation of this docket to the hearing examiner, grant approval to present the proposed settlement agreement and testimony in support of the settlement agreement at its June 12, 2024 meeting, and approve the proposed form of public notice of a June 12, 2024 evidentiary hearing. Unless there's any questions, I have nothing further.
Doesn't appear there are any questions. Mr. Geddes?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the Commission. Staff supports the joint motion and asks you to favorably consider it.
Thank you, Mr. Geddes. Ms. Iori?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and Commissioners. The public advocate also supports the proposed order and public notice and would request that the Commission enter the order and approve the form of public notice. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Iori. Commissioners, any questions or?
Mr. Chairman, I would like, first, I'd like to request a copy if you say you have that
We do.
room. It doesn't need to come forward now. I'm going to make a motion to approve the settlement agreement, but I would like to
No,
welcome.
not the settlement agreement. No.
I'm sorry,
The order,
I would-
order 1045.
Order 10455 on the basis of the input provided by the testimony here. But I would like, before I leave the room, to have a copy to take with me, okay? So, Mr. Chairman, I move that we adopt order number 10455 as submitted.
I second the motion.
Is there any discussion on the motion to approve 10455? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Any negatives, any abstentions? The motion carries.
Thank you.
Ms. Emerson. We've got number 2 in the matter of Delmarva Power Annual Update for 24-26 Infrastructure Safety and Reliability Plan. And I guess we have, I've got at the top, Ms.
I
Iori.
was going to say, I think I'm up first on this one. I've been asked to present staff and the DPA's position on this, and I said I would do it, so. Commissioners and Mr. Chairman, you may recall that in late 2023, staff and the DPA filed a petition to waive the requirements of 26 Delaware Administrative Code Section 3007.6.3.1 because they were going to propose amendments to the ISR regulations. And that is in process, although it's been a slower process than we would have liked, but it's in the works. You may also recall that in January 2024, you granted staff's and the DPA's petition to waive the requirements of Section 3007.6.3.1 so that the parties would not have to meet twice and confer about the proposed ISR. So all Delmarva had to do was file its final ISR, which it did on May 13th. So in proposed order number 10456, you will be acknowledging that Delmarva has filed its 2024 Infrastructure, Safety, and Reliability Plan, and that it is consistent with the ISR regulations in 26 Delaware Administrative Code Section 3007. You will also be confirming that notwithstanding your acknowledgement of the plan, any party may challenge Delmarva's attempt to recover the amounts spent to maintain the reliability and quality of its distribution system and services in a future rate case. So with that, staff and the DPA request the commission to enter on order number 10456. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Iori. Mr. Jordan.
Good afternoon, Chair Winslow. Brian Jordan for Delmarva Power and Light Company. That's an accurate recitation of the procedure behind Order 10456. I would just add a couple of other points for this one specifically. The regulations require that we file this before March 31st. This was filed March 26th. And the regulations also require that we file the final copy within 120 days of filing. We've obviously met that too by filing it May 13th. So it fits all of the procedural aspects. The last thing I would point out is that this is specifically for Delmarva's electric DSIC. The gas DSIC is still subject to the usual meet, confer, and comment period. With that said, Delmarva is in support of order number 10456. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Jordan. Commissioners, do you have any questions? Commissioner Conaway?
Move that we adopt order number 10456 as presented.
I second.
Is there any discussion on the motion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Any abstentions, any in the negative? The motion carries. Thank you very much, everyone. We have something on the hearing schedule today. We have in the matter of the application of Chesapeake Utilities Corporation for approval of a change in its gas sales service rates. And we have Ms. Foy for Chesapeake, and who's going to be beginning?
Thank you, Chair Winslow and Commissioners. Lindsay Foy on behalf of Chesapeake Utilities. This is the hearing on Chesapeake's application for approval of a change in its gas sales service rates and a change in its firm and interruptible transportation balancing rates. The Commission should have the joint exhibit log listing 10 exhibits. It is my understanding that all parties agree that the exhibits on the exhibit log are admissible, and therefore I would like to offer those exhibits into evidence.
They are admitted without objection.
Thank you. The company calls its first and only witness, Marie Kozel, and asks that she be sworn. I do. Please state your name, business address, and position with Chesapeake.
My name is Marie Kozel. Business address is 500 Energy Lane, Dover, Delaware, 19904, and I'm a regulatory manager with Chesapeake Utilities.
What has been your assignment in this docket?
My assignment in this docket was to present and discuss the calculation of Chesapeake's proposed GSR gas sales service rates to be effective for service rendered on and after November 1, 2023. I also participated in settlement discussions and reviewed the settlement agreement.
In connection with that assignment, did you prepare and file on August 31st, 2023, an application for approval to implement a new rate under the company's GSR tariff provisions?
Yes.
In connection with that assignment, have you also prepared pre-filed direct testimony consisting of 28 pages of testimony together with 15 schedules?
Yes, I did.
And has that testimony been marked and entered into evidence as Exhibit 2?
Yes.
Do you have any changes or corrections that you would like to make to your direct testimony?
No, I do not.
Is the information set forth in the application, the schedules to the application, and your pre-filed direct testimony true and correct to the best of your knowledge?
Yes.
If I were to ask you today the questions set forth in your pre-filed direct testimony, would your answers be the same?
Yes, they would.
As part of your assignment in this docket, have you reviewed the settlement agreement entered into between the parties?
Yes, I have.
Do you believe that the terms of the settlement agreement, which has been marked as Exhibit 10, are just and reasonable and in the public interest?
Yes.
What impact would the settled GSR rates have on a typical residential customer?
Compared to the rates in effect since December 1st of 2021, an average residential service RS2 customer using 700 CCF per year would experience an annual decrease of approximately 19.13% or $19.95 per month. During the winter heating season, a typical RS2 customer using 110 CCF per winter month will experience a decrease of approximately 20.98% or $20.98 per month.
And just one item of clarification, that would be compared to the rates in effect since December 1st, 2022, correct?
Oh, that's correct.
Okay.
Sorry.
Thank you, Ms. Kozel. I have no further questions at this time. Ms. Kozel is available for cross-examination or any questions from the commissioners.
Ms. Sweeney?
Staff does not have any questions for this witness.
Ms. Iori? No questions. Any more witnesses? That's the only witness I see.
Not from Chesapeake, no, Your Honor.
Ms. Sweeney?
Thank you, Chair Winslow. Staff has one witness, and that's Ms. Klashana Marshall, and staff asks that she be sworn. Yes. Ms. Marshall, please state your name and business address for the record.
Shauna Marshall at 861 Silver Lake Boulevard, Cannon Building, Suite 100, Dover, Delaware, 19904.
Ms. Marshall, by whom are you employed?
The Delaware Public Service Commission.
And what's your position with the commission?
Public Utility Analyst.
In connection with your employment as a public utility analyst, have you performed certain review and investigation in this docket?
Yes, I reviewed the application, testimony, schedules, data requests, hedging plans, and orders issued for prior GSR dockets.
Did staff retain any experts for this docket?
Yes, Mr. Jerome Muirswa of Exeter Associates was retained on behalf of staff and DPA to assist in review of the application.
Do you have any changes to your pre-filed direct testimony that's marked as Exhibit Number 6?
No.
Were there any public comments received for this docket?
No.
Were you involved in the negotiations on behalf of the commission staff that led to the settlement agreement in this case?
Yes.
Ms. Marshall, do you believe that the proposed settlement marked as Exhibit Number 10 results in just and reasonable rates and is in the public interest?
Yes, I do.
Please explain your reasons for this belief.
Staff recommends that the rates proposed in Chesapeake's application and approved by the commission on a provisional basis be finalized. Chesapeake has agreed to perform a new load study that will include additional variables for consideration in its forecasting model, including the variation in heat degree days, the impacts of days of the week, and wind speed for its next filing. Chesapeake will also continue to hold quarterly meetings with staff and the DPA to monitor its over and under collection, its hedging programs, process improvement discussions, and any other areas of interest to the parties, and comply with the provisions of previous settlement agreements. Staff found that the proposed GSR rates are just and reasonable. They were calculated correctly and in accordance with the company's tariff.
Thank you, Ms. Marshall. Ms. Marshall is now available for any cross-examination.
No questions.
No questions.
And that's the only witness, I presume. Ms. Iori?
Oh, thank you, Chairman Winslow and Commissioners. The public advocate calls Andrea Melcher to the stand and asks that she be sworn.
Yes.
Would you please provide your full name and business address?
Andrea Moucher. My business address is the Thomas Collins Building, 540 North DuPont Highway, Suite 3B, Dover, Delaware, 19901.
And by whom are you employed?
The Delaware Division of the Public Advocate.
What is your position at the Division of the Public Advocate?
I'm a public utility analyst.
And what are your duties and responsibilities in that position?
Generally, I'm responsible for overall management of those dockets where the public advocate has intervened. This includes review of applications, testimonies, and discovery responses, selection of consultants where necessary, participation in the development of positions taken by the public advocate in cases.
And as part of your duties and responsibilities, did you review the application of Chesapeake Utilities for a change to its gas sale rates?
Yes.
And did the public advocate join with staff in retaining Jerome Mierswa of Exeter Associates to review the application?
Yes.
Did Mr. Mierswa submit the pre-filed testimony that has been marked as Exhibit 7 and admitted into evidence?
Yes.
Does that testimony reflect the positions that the DPA would have taken in this case if it were litigated?
Yes.
Are you familiar with the proposed settlement that has been entered into in this docket?
Yes.
Did you participate in the negotiations that led to the proposed settlement?
Yes.
Do you believe that the proposed settlement will result in just and reasonable rates and is in the public interest?
Yes.
And why do you believe that?
First, the settlement recommends approval of Chesapeake's proposed GSR rates. The GSR is a pass-through of natural gas commodity costs Chesapeake incurs to provide natural gas service to its customers. The calculations are either correct or they are not, and in this case, the rates have been calculated correctly and in accordance with the company's tariff. Second, Chesapeake has agreed to make commercially reasonable efforts to evaluate 2 additional parameters in its next load study, as recommended by staff DPA witness Wierswa. The company has agreed to undertake this review without incurring additional costs, but if that becomes necessary, the company will first consult with the parties prior to incurring any added costs. Finally, the settlement agreement continues a number of provisions from previous GSR settlements designed to keep staff and DPA informed of material changes that could impact Chesapeake's GSR rates. In conclusion, I believe the proposed settlement agreement in this case results in rates that are just and reasonable for residential and small commercial customers and adequately resolves concerns raised by the parties. Since it's unlikely that the Commission would reach substantially different decision, additional litigation in this matter would be a waste of time, money, and effort that would ultimately be paid by customers. For these reasons, I urge the customer to approve the proposed settlement agreement.
Thank you, Ms. Melcher. Ms. Melcher is available for cross-examination or any questions from the commission.
No questions.
Staff has no questions.
Commissioners, do you have any questions of the parties? Commissioner Drexler?
I move that we, that we accept the findings in this hearing? I don't think there's an order at this time. We're just adopting the settlement agreement, yeah. Move that we adopt the settlement agreement as presented.
I second.
Everyone's looking around. Usually there's usually an order number.
I don't see an order.
The order will be presented at the next commission meeting.
The next we'll have, yes, Ms. Davis said we'll have it at the next meeting to sign. Okay,
So
We
there's,
do approve.
there's no action.
No action? We do approve.
we have to vote. We're going to vote first, but, yeah.
Okay.
Any-
Second?
I second.
Okay, we've had a motion, we've had a second. Is there any more discussion? There's not. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? The motion carries. Thank you all very much. Yes, sir.
Mr. Chair, Brian Jordan again from Delmarva. I wanted to ask if I could correct a misstatement I made on regular agenda 2. I used the word DISIC when I meant to say ISR. Thank you. Yeah, I was working on DISIC this morning and it was still up there. Thank you.
Mr. Hardigan.
Thanks, Chairman Winslow. Great to see Dr. Barua here today, and glad he's doing well. Our next meeting will be June 12th.
Okay. Thank you all very much. We are adjourned.